Hello, welcome to a series of lectures on urban economics and management with a special focus on cities of developing countries. My name is Lusubga Kironde, Professor of Urban Economics and Land Development. This is lecture number 4, which is focused on urban employment and livelihood and activities. Welcome. In the previous lectures, we saw the meaning, scope, and application of urban economics. We saw the economics of urban urbanization, and we also saw urban land uses in the cities of developing countries. It is our hope that at the end of this lecture, you will have grasped a number of concepts and ideas. Concepts of employment, and unemployment, underemployment, livelihood and activities, economically active population, differences between developed and developing countries in terms of employment, the informal sector and its proliferation in the cities of developing countries, and policy considerations with regard to employment, livelihood earning activities, and the informal sector. Let us start by grasping some concepts. And these are taken from the Tanzania's National Employment Policy of 2008. And these are economically active population, employment, employed person, unemployment, underemployment, decent work, the youth, and the informal sector. Economically active population means all persons who furnish the supply of labor for the production of goods and services during a specified time reference period. The not economically active population means those people who are neither employed nor unemployed in a reference period, and include people doing solely unpaid domestic work in their own house, students, the sick, retired, and those who are too old. Employment includes legally accepted activities which are within the national accounts production boundary. Activities aiming at attaining decent work goals, activities yielding an income at least equivalent to the set of sectoral minimum wage. Person is meant to be employed if he did some work during a specified period of pay, for pay in cash or in kind. This person could be self-employed for profit or family gain. It could also include people outside this, who are temporarily, for example, those who are sick, and it includes people who are doing unpaid family work. The person who is unemployed is a person who is not employed as above, but who stated that they were available for work, but they couldn't get any work. Unemployment and underemployment. Unemployment means a situation where somebody is forced to be idle. They want to work, but they can't work. Nobody is there to hire them. And the unemployment rate is a percentage of those people who are unemployed relative to the total labor force. We consider somebody to be underemployed if they could work more, but they are forced to work much less hours because of circumstances. They could do more, but also they do the same thing for long hours, or something that they could do for a shorter period. There is the concept of decent work. This means productive and remunerative employment for men and women in an environment providing respect for labor rights, dialogue, and social protection. Employment, unemployment, and the economically active population tend to include the youth, and therefore we need to define who the youth are. The definitions of the youth differ between countries. The usual international definition refers to persons aged between 15 and 24 years, but in Tanzania, the youth are considered to be persons aged between 15 and 35 years. Now, the informal sector. The informal sector means non-farm, small-scale, and self-employed income-generating activities based on low level of organization, low capital, and low technology. And we shall see more of this later. Livelihood activities mean the means of making a living, and it encompasses people's capabilities, assets, income, and activities required to secure the necessities of life. So many informal sector activities actually aim at earning a livelihood. Now, I said from the start that these are lectures on urban economics. So why should we deal with labor issues? We deal with labor issues because urban areas are supposed to be the basis of providing a framework whereby a lot of market employment can be created on the basis of agglomeration economy. So we are supposed to have a myriad of markets. It is cheap to establish industries and other employment generating activities. That's why people flock to urban areas to better their lot. At the same time, the effect of labor in getting income impacts on other activities in urban areas, including consumption, housing, transport, and so on. Now, when we compare developed and developing countries, during the industrial revolution in the industrialized countries, there were many industries being established. And these needed labor. At that time, much of the labor was in the rural areas. So people were even forced off their land by systems called like enclosure to provide labor to the various factories and other establishments needing labor. But in developing countries, at this moment, the situation is the opposite. The labor market in terms of employment is small compared to the growth of the population. Therefore, unemployment rates are very high. For example, it is reported that in Tanzania, there is an addition to the labor force of 800,000 people, mainly the youth, every year. But those who are absorbed in the formal employment are around 30,000. So most of these youth end up in what has come to be known as the informal sector. The informal sector encompasses a myriad of activities, such as itinerant vendors, popularly known as machinga in Tanzania, open-air market vendors. In Uganda, they have this term called owino, workshop operators, mechanics, artisans, and in Kenya they have a very lovely name. They call them jua kali. Workshop operators, mechanics, and artisans, who include also carpenters and other artisans. Builders, who put up our buildings. Miners, can see people, especially the mine sand. Those who produce building materials, informally, like building blocks and building hardcore. Transporters, especially those who are these days out of border and the private sector transporters. Food vendors, they are very popular, mainly women providing food in open air restaurants. Street traders, car washers, touts, and so on. Now, this informal sector is worth billions of shillings, but it's largely undocumented. It is characterized by ease of entry and exit. Mostly it's unregistered. It may need little capital to start up. Many are self-employed, though some are employers. It is generally characterized by low income, hard work, with no social security. This informal sector makes urban management a headache, since these people can set up shop anywhere for land earmarked for other activities, such as open spaces, car parks, pedestrian ways, bus stations, and even licensed shops. But it has links with the formal sector. Sometimes the formal and informal sector complement each other, where, for example, sellers of hardware have people sitting outside there to be able to provide the necessary services. Many of these are small units, but there are thousands of actors, and they are a huge political force. Now, policy issues were that governments have undertaken several policy issues. They tried to send people back to the villages, but these policies have been avoided. Then they tried to plan specified trading areas. The problem of location, market mismatch, accessibility, and poor infrastructure. So these ending up as white elephants. They attempted to build trade complexes, such as markets. In Tanzania, we have this famous Machinga complex, but these ended up again to be white elephants. Governments have tried forcefully to push these informal sector activities into in a number of areas, but this has just resulted in violent clashes, animals against the government, and wasteful of resources. Some governments have tried to do nothing, just leave them do what they want, but again, this has led to chaos. So, what can we be recommended? I think it's important for policymakers to think of creating areas of maximum accessibility to match the informal sector needs and the large population movements, for example, in central areas, bus stops, and so on. Public authorities may want to think about community-based approaches, organize these people into their own communities. The public sector should think of having a rapport between themselves and these informal sector operators, to see them not as a problem, but as a solution to unemployment and livelihood, especially for the youth. And you need to adopt approaches that can see the informal sector operators moving upwards from being jacks to kings, for example, by training them, by giving them financial literacy, and by organizing them so that they can upgrade their situation. So we also need a policy on the informal sector in general, because we don't know it. And when you look at Tanzania, the last study that was done was in 1990. There are numerous scholars, especially Professor Alison Brown, who have done extensive research on the policy and advise government. So we need to harmonize approaches, for example, between the central government, the local governments, the politicians, NGOs, and the civil society organizations. I think we cannot say the informal sector should operate free of charge. You need some charges which may allow the public sector to assist the informal sector. For example, with cleaning their working areas, with providing shelter, with even providing conveniences. These people, you ask yourself, they are on the street all the time. Where do they go if they want to go for convenience? Public authorities may need to see the informal sector as a friend, not as a foe, but you need soft and non-burdensome regulation. Public authorities also need to adopt policies that favor local investment and the ease of doing business, so that you can expand the possibility of creating employment. Public authorities may also think of having traffic-free streets or days. I think in the Doma, you have some streets which are just one way, where cars are not allowed, and where therefore the informal sector can operate without hurting anybody. To conclude, we need to point out that the informal sector is not going to go away tomorrow. It is providing livelihood for thousands of the youth. So the public sector must come up with friendly policies. The informal sector should not be isolated alone for regulation. Also, other areas need regulation, such as land and building. Basically, the informal sector should also operate in a city which is regulated, including all other activities. Thank you very much for listening. If you like this lecture, please do strike the like button, but we also encourage you to subscribe. Thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next lecture.